Welcome back to the PCC podcast. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about nutrition beyond numbers. We're going to be talking about specifically how to quiet your food noise. And in the last episode, if you haven't already listened to that, if you don't know what food noise is, or you feel like you're not sure, how to really get started when it comes to understanding that, that's a good episode to start with, episode 110. And then this one is going to be all about how to actually get rid of food noise by treating nutrition in a way that doesn't just revolve around numbers. And that's really where a lot of this tends to come from. So as a quick recap, to make sure we have our definitions right, we talked about in the last episode how food noise is a persistent, intrusive set of thoughts about food that take up your mental space even when you're not physically hungry. And it's incredibly disruptive to your quality of life. It creates decision fatigue. It makes you second guess your choices and disconnects you from internal cues like hunger, fullness, satisfaction. And it's honestly just exhausting because you're already probably juggling the mental load of like 17 people. So food noise is a really big issue for our clients. When I started talking about it, the number of my clients that came to me saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea this thing had a name. I had no idea that this was even happening. I just thought that like this was normal. And the fact that so many women are living with food noise as normal is such a sad reality. So we are going to fix that today by giving you the strategies that I use with my clients to quiet food noise. So we're just going to go right down the list. We're not going to beat around the bush because I don't do any of that. And you guys are going to be able to take from this episode tangible, tactical takeaways in order to solve food noise for yourself slowly but surely. Now, before we get into that, if you are enjoying this podcast, this topic, don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and review, because this podcast is something I've become increasingly passionate about over the years, being able to pour into our clients and you guys who are either our clients, not our clients, just random listeners that maybe I don't even know exist, but you are learning from me. I just want to say thank you so much. And if you do want to return the favor, because this podcast is free, just leave a rating and review. Okay, so here's how to start quieting the food noise. Number one is going to be feeding the body first. So we talked about in the last episode, which is why the last episode is important for context, that there is physiological and psychological drive for why food noise happens. I'm not going to go into the details there because it's all explained in that last episode, but feeding the body first means not being underfueled, means having regular, balanced meals that stabilize blood sugar and calm the nervous system. So having a lean protein in your meal, having fiber in every meal, and bringing your calories up, meaning don't just overload on protein. You're going to include either rice, pasta, bread in your meal, and that is a normal meal. And that meal might have 500 to 600 calories in it, and your jaw is probably on the floor, but that is a normal sized meal for an adult female. So we're not going to fear carbs. We're going to do this in a structured manner. If you have 600 calorie meals a day, you're still only eating 1,800 calories. You still got room for snacks. Okay. So the amount of food that we should be eating as adult women trying to lose body fat and build muscle is severely underestimated. And I have a lot of episodes in the, I think 70, 80, 90 episode range about metabolism and explaining why this is. So feel free to go binge the podcast, but I'm not going to go into too much detail there. But the biggest thing here is that when we focus on adding rather than restricting, number one, it starts to rewrite some of the narrative that we have around food in general, of that nutrition and food is to be feared, to be avoided, to be restricted. And when we add protein, add fiber to our meals, we think about bringing calories up and not down. It just starts to flip what we had learned all of our life on its head, right? So focus on adding nourishment, protein, fiber, water intake, instead of removing foods. The next strategy here is rebuilding trust with yourself. And that sounds really crazy. But again, if we go back to the other episode, where does food noise come from? It comes from the bombarding of noise on social media, making us second guess if what we're doing is right. Why do we second guess? Because we don't have utter and complete trust with ourselves that we are doing the right thing. We don't trust our body. We don't trust our decisions. And why don't we trust ourselves? It's because we're not consistent enough. We're on and off, we're up and down, we're yo-yoing, we're on the hamster wheel, and we are not being consistent. The only way to rebuild self-trust is through consistency. So how this is going to work is starting with structure. Okay. You can't listen to your hunger signals if they're unpredictable. And so structure is going to reduce anxiety, not rigid rules, but predictable patterns. This is where a lot of times I get kind of pushback from either other coaches or clients who are skeptical about my approach. And they're like, Marissa, like, it sounds so like flowy. Like, how do you like, where's the structure? How can I just eat whatever I want and see results? Well, because there is structure. It's just not rigid, dogmatic structure that you've used in the past. So, for example, eat a breakfast, eat a lunch, eat a dinner. Have a snack in between lunch and dinner if that's a large gap of time that's over 4 or 5 hours long. Have those meals be 500 to 600 calories each. It doesn't really matter what time the breakfast, the lunch, and the dinner are, as long as they are pretty roughly evenly spaced across the day. And then when we are doing that consistently, our body will create predictable hunger patterns as a result of having regularly scheduled meal times. It does not work the other way around. If we try to listen to our hunger cues without structure in place, we will end up just flying by the seat of our pants and eating like a random grazer. It doesn't work. And from that, we can then learn to understand and trust hunger and fullness signals, because 500 to 600 calorie meals are an actual meal that will get you satisfied instead of stuffed, especially when they are filled with protein and fiber and healthy carbohydrates. And then from there, we can learn what is an appropriate level of fullness feel like, and what does an appropriate level of hunger feel like before a meal where I'm hungry, but I'm not ravenous, right? Because if we eat a 200 calorie meal between lunch and dinner, then by the time dinner comes around, we are going to want to eat our entire foot, right? So this is how we rebuild trust with our body's patterns. And then because we have that, when we go out to eat, when we go into a situation where things aren't as controlled, we can then rely on trusting our body when we are eating until we are full, right? So having this trust, being able to be intuitive, doesn't come without reps, okay? And then tuning into what your body tells you about food. This is number 3. This is a concept that we will call body food choice congruence. Many of our clients will know what this is because we work on it all the time. This is how you judge your decisions. And right now, if you're listening to this, you resonate with food noise, the likelihood that you judge your decisions around food based on either caloric content or whether you think the food is inherently good or bad is very high. And so that's a very limited scope of whether the decision that you made was actually a good one or not. So what I mean by that is we need to ask ourselves, what does feeling good from our food, feeling good from a meal even mean versus feeling bad? So right now, that lens might be something along the lines of feeling good from eating a meal might mean it tastes good, and feeling bad might mean I feel guilty after. But that keeps us in the moral judgment hamster wheel. So how do we describe feeling good to our body? So we're going to ask questions like, how well did I digest this food? Did I have any bloating or digestive symptoms after this meal? Did I feel adequate and appropriate sustained energy after this meal, or did I crash? How did the meal taste does enter the conversation here. But also, how satisfied was I not only physiologically, but psychologically from this meal? And was there anything else that affected my experience with this meal, right? Do I have a food sensitivity? Things like that. How did I sleep the night after, etc.? And then from there, we can then further expand our definition of what feeling good with our choices means. And so when we're then faced with a decision around, should I eat the thing or should I not? We can say, well, I want to feel good from this decision. When I reference my past decisions, now that I have this wider definition, what choice and what food is going to not only satisfy my taste buds, but also give me sustained energy, not leave me feeling bloated, right? And so it's not just about how you feel in the moment, and it's not just about avoiding guilt. And so with clients, we do this a lot because then they are able to self-select a decision that's in alignment, usually with their goals, if we're being totally honest, be able to make indulgences in moderation, and not have overwhelming amounts of guilt because they finally just started paying attention to what they actually felt in their body. And then they are making more aligned decisions like higher protein, higher fiber foods, more nutrient dense foods, without having to feel like they're willing themselves through it because it's what they actually want. If you've ever like met someone or been frustrated by people who just like seem to always make the right choice, this is why, is because they have body food choice congruence. They are not just making choices based on their food noise. Okay. The next point here that we're going to work on is reducing mental noise with external clarity temporarily. Okay. So, what does this mean? So, for example, having a flexible framework like our nutrition systems at PCC give the brain certainty of what to do with particular guidelines based on how you feel, which silences the need for control. So, for example, what is the nutrition system that we have here? And I have a podcast episode for this. I have a whole 4-part series on how exactly I would coach you. But how we start is we start with your foundations. We take an audit of your nutrition and we look at what is already there, what's not. We typically look for protein, for fiber, for an adequate amount of fuel in general, an adequate amount of whole foods in general. And we start to build into the accountability there, having well-rounded meals multiple times across the day and having the appropriate snacks as backup when needed and making sure that that system is in place because there's a lot of X's and O's that go into that most people are missing because they've always operated with food around numbers and guilt and fad diets. So once we have that sounds super basic, but it's actually pretty hard to do and to accomplish consistently. Then we can move into something like tracking, making sure we're in a calorie deficit and achieving fat loss in a way that feels like it's minimal effort because you already laid the foundation that makes the fat loss part just a couple of tweaks. And then from there, we focus on self-referencing, meaning we as the coaches are not saying, good job, your progress is great, keep it going. We're asking you, how are you feeling in this process? How are you feeling about your progress? What changes do you think we might need to make? What barriers are you facing that we need to overcome together, right? And when you come up with struggles and you say, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that, X, Y, and Z, the answer is not do this instead, do this instead. Here's the answers. That's what most coaches do. I kind of went on a soapbox about this in episode 109. If you've ever had a fitness coach before, maybe you felt like it was a decent experience, but the results didn't stick, go listen to 109. I promise you it will help change your perspective. But the answer is not to tell you what to do. Like, for example, I struggled with over drinking alcohol this past weekend. Most coaches are going to say, next time, set a drink limit, have water between glasses. Cool, we know. But what don't we know is how to actually get ourselves to do that and follow through. And so we will walk through what are the mental and tactical barriers standing in the way? What are realistic things that you actually think that you can do in those situations? So that way you learn how to think about the problem, right? The takeaway that you get for life is not, oh, my behaviors are just perfect forever. It's that when the problem comes up, you know how to problem solve through so that every obstacle that comes up is not a moment to spiral. It's a moment to get curious and to problem solve because you've been given the skills. And so when I say reducing mental noise with external clarity, I mean coaching and I mean temporarily. Okay, most of our clients will work with us for 1 to 2 years and then they graduate. So at the end of the day, they have these self-referencing patterns of here's the obstacle. Instead of making this about how much I'm a failure and how much I suck, I'm going to ask myself what's getting in the way and how can I solve it? That's a pattern that takes time when you've spent a lifetime judging yourself and grading yourself based on every single food decision you've ever made. Okay. So that's how we're going to reduce mental noise is by having someone in your corner to be able to walk you through those things so that you're not constantly second guessing like, oh my God, am I a failure? Did I on track? Am I off track? Am I progressing at the right pace, etc.? Because you have someone there to help calm that. And then by the time you exit, right, you're able to do this on your own because you have taught yourself how to think. And then the last piece here is regulating your nervous system. So when your nervous system is in overdrive, meaning your body, your body or your brain detects a threat. It detects a threat because we are sensing stress, whether that is conscious or subconscious. Even if we're just like wound up about tracking our macros, that's going to signal to our nervous system the same type of stress as being chased by a bear. Maybe to a different degree, of course. Maybe we're not fearing for our life, but it's still a threat signal to the body. So how do we make sure that our body's not stuck in overdrive? Because when our body's stuck in overdrive, our brain will send more threat signals in the form of self-referential, ruminating, negative thoughts on top of all the food noise we're already experiencing. So things like going on a walk without your phone, breath work, slowing down and taking 4 deep breaths before you eat a meal, chewing 15 to 20 times when you eat, humming to stimulate your vagus nerve, touching grass, being outside. When your body feels safe, it stops searching for threats, including food anxiety. So this is where we might work into mindful eating practices, mental brain dump practices, and your nervous system as a whole, where my background in neuroscience really couples in with the strategy of fat loss and the strategy of mindset coaching as well. Okay. And this is why we must treat the whole person and not just a part of it. Again, episode 109 goes into a little bit more detail on that approach if you're interested. Okay, but just remember that when it comes to food noise, it's not about telling your brain to shut up. You can't think your way to peace with food. You have to act your way there. You have to feel your way there. You have to reverse the patterns on the way there. So that is how we do it, how we help our clients reduce food noise. It's a gradual process. It's not going to happen overnight. But what I will say is the clients that we work with, when they finally have trust in us to have us take the reins and help walk them through their journey, that immediately lowers a lot of anxiety because you're no longer doing it alone with people that you trust. So we're going to rebuild your metabolic safety, which is going to reduce the physiological drive to have food noise. We're going to regulate your nervous system to teach your brain that food is safe and you're not going to mentally spiral from feeling unsafe. And then we rewire those perfectionistic, overthinking type patterns where we're getting back to connecting with your body, and all along the way, making sure it's personalized and sustainable so that everything you actually work through is something that you can take with you and do for the rest of your life. So remember, what is food noise? A sign of disconnection from your body and trying to find answers outside of yourself. Not a moral flaw, not something wrong with you, not something you can't change. It's simply a signal that we're out of connection and our brain doesn't feel safe. And we need to create that safety, that nourishment, that structure, that compassion, rather than just throwing more rules or plans or challenges on it. So if you struggle with food noise, and it's a big proponent of why you struggle to be consistent with your nutrition and therefore see results, give these tactics a try. Let me know how they go. And if you give these tactics a try and they don't really work all that well on your own, that's where coaching comes into play. And we're going to leave my Instagram as well as our link to apply for our coaching and book a call, where you can fill out a quick form that's going to ask you some deeper questions about your why, your motivations, where you're at, and then book a call so that we can discuss what working together would look like. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that this helps to cure your food noise and take you a couple steps in the right direction, if not all the way there. Please let me know if you guys have questions. My DMs are always open on Instagram. I am always responding to people who comment, who DM me on my content, and I want to help. So looking forward to hearing more from you guys, some feedback on this episode. Thanks again for listening. Thank you so much for your attention, as I know that that is your most valuable resource. And I will see you back here for the next episode.